So I think a fun way to kind of start these off, at least for me, is just if you would introduce yourself, who you are, and what you want people to know about you.
Oh wow. Yeah, who am I? The question of the ages. Yeah, my name is Carver Brown. Um, gosh, Kevin, I'm a guy in long-term recovery. I was in international sales and marketing with what became a small $30 million company, and and then found my way to sobriety, and then all of a sudden, my whole life and career and path changed, and I wound up in the helping field. Uh,
Mm.
so maybe that's the short version.
Yeah, I think if I look at the timeline of how I've known you and how I've sort of perceived you, it's kind of interesting. I think I would have initially described you as someone who's very charming, and the way that I've described you to other people is someone that I could listen to just read the phone book, and just be captivated. I think you have a way of doing it, but I think later, as I've known you, um, and going into this, I was thinking about what's the best way to describe it, and I think there's a surface level to the charm, but I would say it's really an approachable depth that like I didn't appreciate in the beginning, but I think of a lot of the work that I've known you to do, it's meaningful, it's personal, it's intimate, it's touching, and so you can't just displace that with the fact that you have that charm about you. I think it's the charm provides the ability. It sets like the setting. It makes it where people are open to listening, and that um, you're not institutional, you're not robotic, you're truly listening, which I think is incredible. Um, did you always possess that, or is that something that was developed later?
Well, first of all, it's so kind for you to say that. I think this observation of me, I want a copy of this. I think it's just so, I don't know what to say other than thanks. I like hearing that. But I think part of this comes from kind of two sides of the coin. Number one, growing up in the sales marketing kind of environment, and I cut my teeth in all of that, kind of learned my way into it. I needed to I needed to find a way to to access the inordinate amount of time that of people's interest in our products. So I needed to find a way to engage. And the way that I found to do that best was with humor. And a lot, and being from Mississippi and talking the way I do, this I just come out of the gate pretty hysterical, I mean, because I was working mostly up in the Northeast with dealers and chain accounts and millionaires, honestly. And so I had to find a way to engage with those guys. And so that's kind of where maybe the exuberance, comes from. But the other side of the coin is through the struggle, is trying to figure out who I really am, that long involved journey that I'm still on now. And there's a bit of to use our transparency to try to meet people where they are. So in the business world, I always had this need to try to meet the client where they are and to find a way to bond with them so that we could see things from a similar point of view. But now, in the struggle of personal identity and recovery, it becomes about doing really, in a sense, the same thing, trying to meet people where they are, trying to find a way to develop trust and safety with the person. And to do that, what one of the tools I use is transparency. So to say that, listen, I'm still trying to figure this thing out called life, and I ain't figured it out yet, but we get better together.
Mm. Um, I'm going to ask you an introduction part two because I want to ask you a question, but I want the audience to have a little bit of context. Can you describe some of your day job right now, what it is and what you do? Yeah.
Right. So I was trained in intervention, sort of by accident. And so I'm an interventionist, but that's really a sideline, of what I do. Mostly what I do is coaching. I coach families, I coach individuals, some individuals that are in treatment, some that maybe are interested in getting into recovery, whether that's through a treatment experience or not. Many clients that are post-treatment and they're trying to figure out how to apply all that they've learned to how to negotiate early recovery and beyond. But many times I work with families
Mm,
who are struggling, families who are trying to figure out this complicated thing called addiction and mental illness and compulsions. And so I try to, in all of those cases, I try to show up as a truth teller, to evaluate where the people are, create a bond with them, and then to deliver in a way that they can hear it in a palatable way, the truth that maybe they might be avoiding.
mm. And it's probably the case that they haven't been exposed to a lot of truth.
Why
Uh,
would they?
yeah.
Yeah, there's no reason why. When I deal with a lot of really intelligent people who come to this struggle with themselves or a family member, and they just say, "I don't understand," and I tell them, "Why would you? Why, unless you have been through this yourself and have spent time in the world of recovery, it's a labyrinth. Just treatment options is a labyrinth trying to figure out, because everybody's got a great website, and everybody's got these very engaging marketing people who will sell
Mhm.
you on their program. And sometimes that can be an accurate representation and sometimes not so much. And so sometimes we need people who have lived in that world to guide people to make the best choices based on resources, based on proximities. All these things can be a part of it. Yeah.
And so, it's a really interesting perspective that I think you provide because since you do intervention and coaching, you get them before treatment when you have an addicted brain. You have, a family system that's in crisis, acute crisis right there in the moment. And um, I think I suppose removing barriers is probably the most important thing there, but it probably makes it more complicated. And then you on the flip side, how do you provide continued hope? So maybe starting at the beginning of that journey, my understanding, and I'm not commonly around people who are in active addiction. Uh, and if their brains aren't working in the way that they would if it wasn't, how do you connect? How do you connect with them and say, okay, everything that you know, everything that you're using to cope isn't sustainable, and
Right.
the hurt that it's causing. I mean, what in the end is it different every time? Do they begin to understand the hurt they're causing their families, the hurt they're causing themselves? Is it envisioning the future in a different way? What do you see?
A little of all of that. The way you describe it, it's like now I kind of wonder how in the world I'm able to do it after the way you phrased all that. But honestly, in its simplest form, many times the family's involved right from the beginning. So in the very beginning, I'm an advocate for the family. And the people who are concerned about the person who's trapped. So I want to create one thing we learn early on is, you can't approach or you shouldn't approach someone with one of these struggles without having a solution in place. You need to have a solution ready to go. So, and to go to somebody and say, "Man, you're drinking too much, or you're doing this, or you're doing that," you need to get a handle on that. Is just about as unhelpful as it can be. But the way I approach the family is once we go in to approach the individual, the person of concern, then I become their advocate. So I walk into that thing and I am here to help you. And with me are the people who love you the most and the people that you love the most. And here's the thing, I can tell you, you are so blessed to be around so many people that care about you. And I can, and one thing I think we might be able to agree on is I get the sense that you're not living your best life right now, that there's some struggles, whatever they may be. And who knows what, I don't know. I'm just a visitor here, but there's some things going on. And there's one thing I can tell you, and this was from personal experience, that there is a solution. And it begins by just taking the first step and let's look at what's going on. And there are people that the family has created a solution for you. And here's the thing, you are a smart enough person to make an informed decision. And I think you and I can agree that making an informed decision is not best done here in your living room. In order to make an informed decision, we need to go meet these people. We need to go see this place. We need to go investigate and then make an informed decision. So why don't we, let's go check it out. And I'll go
Mhm.
with you and we'll go meet these people. And I've been to this place and I can tell you a lot about it. And I'll introduce you to the folks and we'll hang around a little bit, let you kind of meet and feel, maybe even hang out a couple of days. If for whatever reason this isn't a good fit for you, I'll come run and bring you back.
Mhm.
I guess in my and you said something else that's really important, Kevin, is that every situation is different and every approach. So I gotta walk into this situation and evaluate the person and try to once again try to figure out a way to bond with them and create safety. Because if they don't feel safe, then they can't hear what you're talking about. Um,
I think that's where, I could, well, not shadowing you and seeing you do your work, I can see it, you being the right person for it because you're not going into it where you're looking at every situation as largely the same, where you're phoning it in. You're truly listening and and understanding so that way they feel heard, seen, and connected with.
Yeah, well, and you have to roll with resistance and you have to be prepared. So one of the things we do with the families is we ask about all the different ways that the family and loved ones envision that we're going to meet resistance. And we need to have already prepared for what that would be. Kind of like a good attorney doesn't want to ask a question they don't know the answer to. We kind of have to prepare in that way. For instance, who's going to take care of the dog? Who's going to feed the fish? What about that dental appointment? What about, we try to think ahead of everything that's possible. And that's the other thing. So this can take some time. We usually spend a couple of weeks with a family prior to approaching the individual. We really take our time. I want to interview everybody that's on the team. I want to meet with the team several times. We've got a lot of logistics we have to go through. We always do a rehearsal before we approach one of these things. And then, on the backside, there's the opportunity, whether I'm involved in the intervention or not, it's amazing how many people come to me post treatment and they want to continue in the wonderful work that they've done. Now, I'm not therapeutic, so I'm working from a recovery guy. So it's all very practical. I'm being
Mhm.
practical with them. Like, what? Hey, I was just on the phone with the guy. He's just out of treatment and
Mhm.
he's involved in a big festival that his wife is involved in. So he's having to go to all of these cocktail parties and these events, and so we're talking about, and he's telling me how, oh, I'm making it fine, I'm going through. And
Mhm.
I said, absolutely, right now you are. But the thing you need to be aware of is you are using up all your spiritual energy. And my experience is it's after the event is over, the next day or two, that's when the fallout begins. That's when you think inexplicably, I should have a cocktail because you're
Mhm.
depleted. You have used up all your energy. So the way we approach that is we need to make sure that the moment during the events, we're attending to our recovery, and immediately after, we've got to recharge our batteries, recharge our recovery, be prepared for the onslaught that's coming due to the depletion that we've been maintaining through that difficult circumstance. Do you see how it works?
Yeah, I do, and I think it's really important too to just reinforce that at that time. I mean, it's very, very, very early recovery that they're not fixed. So it's like, okay, now you can't go and drink socially anymore or anything. Like this is a commitment, and if you want it, and at that point, hopefully they do want it.
That's
Uh,
right. And you're not trying to get them to avoid in order to recover. We need to, if the man needs to be at that event, where there's going to be a lot of drinking going on, then he needs to be there. We're not going to try to avoid, we're going to try to prepare. So we
mm,
prepare to be able to walk in, and we don't kid ourselves that we're doing better than we think just because we managed to get through this and didn't drink. You're right. It's one thing about this I heard the other day that I really like, that recovery is like a reverse marathon.
okay.
Right? Right. The hardest part's in the beginning, not when you're at the last mile. It's and it gets easier over time. However, we're still running the race.
Yeah.
Oh,
Still a marathon.
that's right. That's right. This summer I'll be enjoying 21 years. And
Wow.
and I still listen, I was at a meeting last night.
Mhm.
I'm gonna go have after I'm gonna meet a client in their home. And then after that, I'm gonna go meet a wonderful recovery guy that wants to just visit this afternoon. So you can't make this stuff up. It's the greatest show on earth.
Yeah. Um, and then I think it's really how to, so we talk about this one phrase with one particular client, sort of in my day job, and it kind of stuck with me, and I try to take it to heart personally, and that's trying to have a life worth protecting. And for me, that's something that you want, to say like, I really don't want to give up. I don't want to throw up my hands right now. What I have is too valuable to me. And I try to do that personally, but of course you are going to be met with challenges in life that are going to test you and really battle test everything you know about yourself. And one of the aspects that I know you do, and we've talked about through TPAS, Treatment Professionals and Alumni Services, for those who aren't familiar with it. And you and I have talked a little bit outside, but I do want to dive in depth more because I think it's something that's largely it's as important as it is not discussed or understood, at least in the common population, as much it is, and that's grief and loss.
Mhm.
And what can you tell me about that? Just like a first overview, and then I want to probably get in a little bit deeper because it's one of those areas that, again, it's like, shouldn't we be teaching something like that along with math in school? How would that change someone's life in a really profound way?
I think it begins with the fact that as a society, we're really crappy at it.
Mhm.
We know our society is built on the accumulation of things, but we don't do much in the way culturally on teaching and learning how to let go of things when we've had losses. And I think grief work is so important. I was going through a difficult time, and my mentor, Leonard, who uh, took me through or introduced me to a process, suggested that I get a partner who you also know, who
Mhm.
for us to do this grief work based on
Mhm.
the grief recovery method, which is a book by John James, and which turns out to be my grand sponsor. You can't make this stuff up. And uh, and John passed away. I think it was last year. His son Cole now runs the institute, but they created the Grief Recovery Institute. And so the thing of it is, you're absolutely right. I think a lot of relapse and a lot of the struggles with people is because, we can get sober, but until we really go through and examine our losses and come to terms with it, then we haven't gotten a complete picture. The two things I think are the hallmark of recovery is, number one, where are you carrying the message? But number two is, how do you handle your losses? And
Mm,
and so the method is such, just in the 10,000 foot view, is when we have a significant loss in our life, we have the tendency either to look at all of the bad it was of a loss, or we
mm,
tend to look at all of the good that it was that we've lost, and which is not a clear representation. So the method gives us an opportunity to really examine the loss that we've had by creating a graph, looking at the events that are the structure of the relationship, identifying the positives and the negatives of it, so that we now are looking at a clear picture of what we've lost. When in grieving the loss of my dad, I needed to go back and look at the events that created our relationship and look at what were the positives, but then what were the negatives of
mm,
that, to be able to, and it gave me a clearer picture of my father than I had ever had up until that point.
mm. I think I want to dive into sort of another sort of facet of it. So, um, from a personal perspective, like me, and in this case with my younger son, I can't claim to be an awesome parent in a lot of ways, and have all sorts of failures that I reflect on. But this one, I really feel like I'm doing a good job on, at least with this one son. Um, and he will, he's 12. He's going to get angry sometimes, and when he gets angry, he's stubborn. He's dug in. Um, and what I've tried to reinforce with him again and again and again, and sit down with him and try to have him sort of process what he's going through, instead of meeting him and having a power struggle and yelling at each other. And I don't think, I think that's not only not helpful, but it's teaching him how to, how to respond in those situations. But what I try to tell him is you can't think when you're angry. And, I think the more he understands that, and now he starts to come at it. In the beginning, it took a while. And now when I, try to talk to him about that, when he's in that moment, he's quicker to understand that. And I think that's really important, because I think in if you're in a state of grief, it's not anger. I mean, maybe there's elements of anger, but in that state of grief, you are overwhelmed with emotion, and it's hard to have any kind of rational aspect of your brain work. And in this case, and where I'm kind of like leaning on you for more understanding about it, is you do have to process the emotional side of it. So you don't want to be so rational. That's never really addressed. So how does one begin to think about that?
Well, first of all, you're a great dad. I mean, taking the time to sit and hold space when it's really difficult is fabulous. And I think, you're asking kind of the $1 million question, is kind of like, how do we go about doing that? How do we how do we manage our emotions without over intellectualizing? So
Mhm.
it's a balance. I mean, it's a balance. First of all, we have to look at grief as symptomology. So,
Mm,
my thinking becomes distorted. I have a hard time being task oriented. I have sleeplessness. My diet might be affected. So there's a whole way of looking at grief and loss from the way that it manifests.
mm,
And and the other thing is, there's I think we all know about the stages of grief. Well, the
Mhm.
stages of grief, as were originally written, were written by a nurse who was working with terminally ill patients. And so part of, sometimes there would be a terminal diagnosis, but the patient wasn't feeling the symptomologies of that. So there certainly was denial. There could be denial. But when we lose somebody, when someone passes away, we're not in denial,
Mhm.
of so I think sometimes the stages of grief can be a bit overused. And so
Mhm.
I think what's helpful to me is to look at the symptoms of what I'm going through and realizing that what I need to do is look at this clearly, openly, and I need to come up with a way. Sometimes, like, I mean, the simplest thing of moving for a child, leaving one house, going to another, seems like an innocuous event. But for all of us, we tend to have a lot of our lives attached to the building. And we need to go
Mhm.
through, it's helpful to go through and tell some stories of what happened in that room and what happened here. And and that's a way to help us process some of the challenges of sudden change. I don't,
Mhm.
does that in any way answer your question?
Yeah, it does. And it continues to get sort of my wheels turning here because um, I think the way I cut my teeth in marketing and stuff like that is somewhat different, probably because I didn't have the sales component to it. So sort of growing up in large ad agencies and um, large global, national and global brands. Um, I didn't need to have the personality side in order to do my work well. I could be more analytical, and I think it didn't serve me well in hindsight because, and this is where being around people in recovery and people and being involved in organizations like TPAS has very much helped me because I think I discounted that aspect of the human experience, a bit. And the reason I bring this up in the grief and loss context is I think before, and again, anyone who's doesn't have people in recovery in their circles, like seek them out. I think you'll be better for it. Um, but I think I would normally just bury it. So instead of sort of the flip side of the coin, instead of being overwhelmed by it,
Compartmentalize.
yeah, it's like, you put your boots on and you keep going further, and you're the rock by which everyone else, relies upon. But I think ultimately, are those the people that don't live past 50 or in their 50s because they've done that? And is it horrible to recognize that you need that and is mental health? And do you in looking at grief and loss ever are you ever confronted with that side of it where you have a family member's like, look, my spouse lost his father and he needs to I know it's in there and I'm going to lose my husband if we don't address it.
Right. You said something really important along this line, Kevin, that it's you know, the benefit of having recovery people in your life. Because one of the tools that we use as recovery people is we live our lives in community.
Mm.
And so one of the things that I think you're talking about is isolation, is
Mhm. Mhm.
isolating within myself to find the compartment to put this thing in so that I don't have to deal with it, and you know and withdrawing within, which I'm gonna suffer. So what we learn in recovery is, and thankfully, oh my gosh, to have a group of people that I trust, that I can go to, and I can share in a general way. I don't have to share the specifics, but it's almost like, Kevin, what every one of us needs is like a pressure relief valve.
Mm,
We need a place where we can go talk about this in whatever detail we need. And that's why we meet individually with people we trust to just process and talk about this stuff. Sometimes, and I'm not looking for answers. I just need to say it out loud. When I went through this divorce, I needed to go to my group and tell them, man, I'm crushed. I had my men's group that I was able to have a kind of a different layer of transparency with them. I had friends in recovery that I had a higher level of transparency with. And then I had the overall group that I had a lower level. But in every one of those instances, I needed to talk about what I was going through, because the only way to get out of this stuff is to go through it. And if I try to bury it somewhere, it's going to be like buried alive. It's
mm,
coming back. It's a zombie. It's coming. It's going to come back from the dead in a lot of ways that are unexpected, like anger, like sleeplessness, like change of diet, all these other things that are manifestations of unprocessed grief.
mm,
So we've got to look at this, and we got to figure a way to look at the relationship realistically, figure a way to say goodbye, which the method helps us do. But also, and maybe most importantly, we got to have safe places where we can talk about this, because every time I talk about it, I get better. And here's the other thing: it's a spiritual two-way street. Ironically, the people I'm sharing it with, they get better too. we
mm.
we get better together. Nobody gets better in a vacuum. It's always done in community. That was a hard lesson. It took me a while to learn.
Yeah, and I think too, people put themselves in a disadvantage where it's almost progressive in what happens sort of post that grief and loss, because it's hard enough just dealing with whatever that event was, but then you're stacking the deck against yourself by not having sleep, acting out in different other ways. Now you have five things to deal with, and you're not in the right. You've given your brain not the right, not the ability to do it anymore. Um, so I mean, I think it does make a case for the fact that, okay, one, this is a thing, and two, you're not alone in it, and I really like what you said, where it's not in a vacuum, that it's really that community that we all get something from it.
The, the
I'm learning that too.
well, the problem is that when we have a truth, we have a hurt, or something that we're not expressing. What it seems to me that happens is it becomes a secret.
Mhm.
And if I'm keeping secrets, then I'm not being transparent. I'm not being authentic. I'm not being true to myself. I'm not, you said, a life worth protecting. I'm
Mhm.
not protecting my life.
Mhm.
See
Mhm.
that I'm not in protection, because if I'm holding on to secrets, that one secret is going to give me the opportunity to bury another one, because I
Mhm.
think I'm being successful at it. And then, but in reality, what I'm doing is, hey, listen, it manifests itself in shoulder pain,
Mhm.
stomach issues, anxiety, depression, withdrawal, sadness, all these things. And then in its worst form, it become overuse of chemicals and alcohol. And now, as you say, and you said it beautifully, I don't just have the one problem. I've compounded it now with a cornucopia of
Mhm.
other things that I need to deal with. And many times when I sit with someone I'm coaching, uh, even with my son, it's like, you got one problem, and if we don't address it, I can see how you're creating another problem. So how many problems would you like to have? Would you like to have one problem, or would you like to have two or three?
Yeah, and I think those who listen to this podcast, I think there's many, many, many who are very close to treatment and recovery, and I think really understand that and spent the time internalizing themselves or professionally, working with people and really have wrapped their head around it. But I think, I almost want to provide for those who really aren't close to it, and this might be like foreign concepts for as I'll use a perfect self-deprecating example because I'm on the better side of it now. But something bad might happen professionally, and you get in a bad head, and you lose your confidence, and all of a sudden you think you're not the person that you once were when you really are. It could be something that had nothing to do with you. The event that happened professionally. Okay, great. Next thing you know, like you're saying, you're not sleeping well. Oh, next thing you know, instead of doing the things that you really love that were meaningful, maybe cooking or something like that. That was really mean. Doing something inspired, and then you put yourself into this, and you feel good that you did it. Instead, you order from Popeyes. And you do that. Oh, now you're gaining weight. Okay, that's not good. Now you're thinking even less of yourself. Oh no, what's happening now? You gain weight. Your knees are starting to hurt. So now it compounds and it compounds and it compounds. I can say, personally, I was able to mentally turn this around because everything that I said happened to me. Yeah, uh, and it's just an outlook, just a positive mindset. It wasn't any special diet. It was just the mindset. All of a sudden, the weights, are dropping, the knees feel, better. You have more confidence going, talking to new people about who you are and what you can do. So I just wanted to see if I could provide another sort of example for ones that want to understand what we're talking about. But again, maybe it's a lot for someone who's just first exposed to it.
Well, it's what you're getting at, what works for me, structure and routine.
Mm,
I need to have, I mean, if it really is a life worth protecting, then it's a life, then we need to protect the life,
mhm,
And so how do I protect my life? I protect my life with my routine and my structure.
mm,
So that means electronics off at night. That means reading before bed. That means making sure that I'm doing the best I can to get as close to 8 hours of sleep as I can, paying attention to my diet.
mhm.
I mean, right now I'm on a sugar purge right now because I had my weight was going up and I realized I was too much sugar coming in. So I'm not no sugar now, and
Okay.
yeah, little things like that to help create structure and balance in my life. I need my routine. I need my balance. I need my structure. I make my coffee the same way every morning.
Mhm,
I mean, I heat the mug. I do pour over. It's
mhm.
this routine, and I find comfort in all of that. I listen to music in the morning to just kind of, I do. I'm an old retired yoga instructor, and so I do restorative yoga in the morning that I call advanced lying around. So I do some stretches to release hips and all, just little, it's all these things, but it all comes. And here's the thing, and the willingness to change my routine when it needs changing, and the willingness to be adaptable. So, because sometimes my routine gets disrupted for various reasons. So I need to make change. It's the structure of that is comforting and gives me a way to recharge my batteries.
And I guess discipline and routine is really, also, and I like that. I'm going to continue to reflect on it, the reverse marathon. Because when you're starting out with discipline, it's what's different. And after time, it's what's the same. And so you're removing uncertainty. And I could understand that calming effect for the brain because you're also building equity in yourself. So every time you do it, um, you're putting another dime in the jar, and that becomes that life worth protecting in the end.
Yes. Listen, I wrote that phrase down. I'm going
How
to
you
use.
doing it?
Oh, I
I'm like, I
absolutely
should have
will.
copyrighted it.
Oh, it no. Oh no. I'll give you credit the first, 5 times I use it.
I
Then
can't with my business partner. I can't accept the credit. He's gonna,
okay.
and plus he's gonna listen to this, and he's gonna want to make sure that
Yeah.
I'm not
I mean,
stealing his thunder.
it's a great phrase, and it really is because honestly, if you have a life by, I mean, the conclusion is it is worth protecting. And then the question is, how are we protecting it? What are
Yeah,
we doing to protect it? So, how are we dealing with our grief and our losses? What is the routine? How are we in community and doing this in some form of community? And this can be a lot of different things for a lot of different people. But whatever it is, we can't do this alone.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I'm glad we kind of came back on that because I think when I always thought of life worth protecting, I didn't really appreciate. And I think now the sort of element of the routine, aspect to it, and it's I always understood the gratitude side, but maybe not the routine
Well,
facet
think
of it.
about it this way. When clients go to treatment, go to have a treatment experience, what are they doing? They're in a routine. They're waking up at the same time. They're doing morning reflection. They're going to breakfast at the same time. They're going to group. Here they are, all these people who really would honestly at the end really would rather be alone. And what's the first thing they do? They put them in group and they start talking because they're showing them the importance of being in community, even though there may be reluctant attendees, which most of us are when we first, do this, but they're building the structure. And so, under the hope that the client will have a discharge plan, a recovery plan that will include structure and routine, and that they'll do what they can to try to implement that to create safety and to create this comfort. I take comfort in my routine.
Yeah, and I think when I think of continuing to think about that idea of what you were saying of it not being in a vacuum, and I really think when you talk about connection, there really is two sides of connection. You can have just one side of connection, and I can relate to someone who doesn't want to jump right into group. If it's not what they're used to, they don't understand the benefit. They don't understand the feeling that you actually get when that happens. You go, oh wow, maybe I want more of that. Maybe that is what's missing. If you've never tasted chocolate, you didn't know it was missing. And then maybe once you have it, sorry, I'm bringing up sugar. But
Perfectly okay. I'm not triggered. Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. I mean, you bring up an excellent point, Kevin, again, because we meet the client, we meet the person where they are,
Mm,
and bringing somebody along and trying to shove them too fast into something to, like the way you're dealing with your son. You're
mhm,
meeting your son right where he is. And there's sometimes I'm certain if your son is like mine, where he does not approachable. He needs
mm,
some time to decompress. And so we
mm,
need to be smart enough to know, well, this isn't a good time to have that conversation because he's elevated and he's not in a place to hear. But once then he's more, he's more grounded, then we can have that conversation. We can go back and talk about, what happened and some alternatives. But we got to wait with the client who's resistant to all this structure and routine and of course sharing and what have you. We bring them along. Here's what I find with that is usually you can make a connection with one person.
mhm,
And if you can make a connection with one person, then there's a great opportunity to make a connection with the second person. So rather than try to bring them into community, which
mhm,
can be overwhelming,
mhm,
just make a connection with one person. But let that connection be part of your routine and your structure.
mhm,
I was told early on that if I had this connection, I needed to nurture the connection because if I didn't nurture the connection when there really wasn't anything significant going on,
Mhm.
And when something significant was going on, I wouldn't have the tendency to reach out to make that connection. I would talk myself out of it. Does that make sense?
Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah, yeah. So that's why it's important to let connection be part of your routine.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think make an effort to it to do it. I mean, there's little things that I've gotten much better over time to not beat myself up for what I didn't do in the past. That if if I knew everything in the beginning, then I wouldn't be growing. And you have to give yourself the space to say, okay, that's right. I'm happy I'm better today than I was yesterday. And there's little things that I did the other day where I was same younger son, and he was going through a thing, and he was in a situation that he was trying to process that wasn't really his fault. But he was collateral damage of what happened. He didn't know how to understand that. I'm sure it hasn't happened much in his life, but it was something very small that I could see that was meaningful to him. And when I did it, I'm like, oh my God, I could see it in his eyes that like sometimes it's a little thing, but I was trying in that moment to make sure that I was connecting with him. And I think that with for ourselves, and that's the thing where we both got benefit from it. You got to benefit from it, but I as well, you know. So I think that's an example of that. But I think sometimes it doesn't just happen on its own. We have to, keep exploring and pushing ourselves um, to prioritize that. Um,
Well, it takes effort. Recovery is a program of action.
mhm,
It's not about what I feel. Your
mhm,
feelings are important, but it's not about how I feel. It's about what do I do? If I wait to where I feel better to go to the gym, I'll never go to the gym.
mhm,
But if I go to the gym, I'll feel better. See,
mhm,
so the action always precedes the feelings rather
mhm.
than feelings preceding the action. And what you're doing with your son and meeting him where he is this brilliant. That's exactly what we do. It's all about connection. What you're doing, you're creating safety for your son so that he has now the opportunity to do a reveal. And
Mhm.
you're absolutely right, Kevin. When we do that and we meet each other in those moments of vulnerability, it's everybody gets better. We grow together. We don't do this in a vacuum. We do it in community with other people.
Yeah, for me, meeting someone where they're at is something that I continue to learn more about. I remember it was probably 15 years ago that I first heard that phrase. And it- I remember being very early on and working with treatment programs, a handful of years. And when I heard it, I'm like, yeah, what does that mean?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. All right, that's a weird thing. Everyone's saying it. All right, I guess. But as the years go, I know it differently the longer I've been doing it. And it becomes, yeah, like in the situation I just mentioned, it's something that I continue to try to understand better, and that there's not one way to do it. And to meet someone where they're at is not as you know it. You really have to understand them, and that's not a cookie cutter thing. Yeah.
It's the three legs of the stool. It's active listening.
Mm,
It's asking good questions and managing the stuff internally that's going on when I'm having that interaction. But I want to go back to something you talked about. You talked about the regret and there's things I wished I'd have done different and everything. And Lord, don't we all have those? What I mean, there's a volume written about the mistakes that I have made, or could be written.
mm,
But here's the way I look at that is it's the mistakes I've made, it's the really dumb things I've done, it's the tragedies that I have endured. Those are the ways that I create bonding. that they actually help me when somebody comes to me and they don't want to share about, or they're reluctant, in order I connect with them. So, but let me tell you what I can identify with what you've done, because let me tell you about what I did, you know, and let me tell you about the solution, for that, or whatever, just, but I think the mistakes that I have made, the terrible dumb things that I've done in my life, help me connect with other people who are worried about the things they've done. I guess what I'm trying to tell them is, you ain't so bad. You know,
Mm.
you ain't so bad. Whatever you've done, I've either done it or done worse, or I certainly know somebody who's done it or done worse. Whatever you have done that you are reluctant to share, you haven't come up with anything new. Right?
Yeah, and don't wallow in it. Like learn. Yeah, and sort of another example. So a couple days ago, I don't know why it entered my mind. I was thinking of someone I went to in high school, a girl that I went to semi-formal with, and I was thinking about it, and I was like, I could have been better. I could have really showed up better in that situation. Nothing bad happened. I'm going to say nothing bad happened on paper or anything like that. But could I have been more attentive? Could I have like been better at taking pictures and stuff like that, and not being the reluctant teenager who didn't want to do that stuff? Yes, it got, and I was, it really hurt me in that moment. And it was, I was going to the grocery store. I don't know why I was thinking about it. To the extent that I'm like, all right, I know this person on Facebook. I'm going to call them and say I'm sorry. And then I did. I'm like, she's never thought about this since. I guarantee you. I didn't do anything horrible. I did. But uh, actually today I was talking to somebody else, about it, and I think let's just learning from it and saying, okay, well, maybe I should think outside my insecurities, and maybe I can do that a little bit, better. That's just a small example of, again, even something that it's the most insignificant thing like that you can sit on and be like, I'm a horrible person, or you can grow from it.
Well, in instances like that, I try to think about how would I respond to someone who came to me with that sort of circumstance that they've gone
Hmm.
through. I would have given them such grace, right?
Mm.
I would have, oh, buddy, yeah, don't we all look back and think, I would point out some of their wonderful attributes and everything. Why am I so quick to do that with others, but I might be reluctant to do that to me?
Mm.
You know, I need to apply the same grace that I would so willingly and freely
Mm.
impart on any other person who walked across my path. I need to be willing to give that to me, because we're all struggling. Ain't none
Mm.
of us have figured this thing out. And anybody that thinks they or positions himself that they have figured it out, I'm very suspicious of. I have to tell you that, because it's a struggle. Life is hard, and of course, we have regrets that come up. I want to try to live and be as graceful to myself as I would be willing to be to somebody else.
Mm. Awesome. Well, thank you, Carver. This was really, good for me, meaningful to me, and I hope and I know everyone else as well. So, thank you for being gracious with your time and carving this out. And I get the benefit of talking to you in other channels, so I will see you again soon.
I hope so, buddy. It's so great holding space with you, and I have delighted spending this time with you. You're absolutely right. We haven't connected in a way like this, and we've needed to for a long time. So I thank you.
The behavioral health care field has always been evolving, but today's changes are unprecedented. Government policies and funding reductions, workforce scarcity, polysubstance complexity, and population health trends all hold implications for patient symptom acuity, the evidence base, access to the continuum of care, and provider viability itself. Barriers old and new are making the process of accessing quality treatment as daunting as ever. Soon, whether due to reimbursement rates or parity changes, value-based care requirements, or even wholesale shifts in the public treatment efficacy narrative, cost-effectively sustaining client census will become more important and potentially more challenging than ever before. As the sands of search are shifting, and authority is the coin of the realm, being seen and earning clients takes even more. The best SEO and advertising, social media, and outreach can't help unless prospective patients, families, and referrents immediately and consistently perceive your excellence. Now, more than ever, your program's representation and reputation matter most. For 20 years, Synchronous has helped behavioral healthcare providers refine and project the nuanced differences and commitment to quality that make them attractive to their client cohort through superlative brands and messages, demonstrable subject matter expertise, multi-channel communications, and materials with meaning. When it comes to behavioral healthcare, it is our experience that people much prefer a flight to safety over a leap of faith.
I've worked in sober housing, I've worked in intervention and family consulting, I held a variety of positions and learned a great.
And when it comes to accurately, ethically, and compellingly positioning behavioral healthcare organizations and nonprofit missions to prospective clients, families, and professionals, having partners who understand that the business of behavioral health is about much more than just business makes all the difference.